So now that we've got the steps complete, I've put them on a layer, and I'm going to go ahead and make this layer a template just by clicking on that little third box right there. I'm also going to go into the grid options, and I'm going to change the colors here to this lighter gray, just because it's a little bit overwhelming. And actually, I'm going to make the steps layer invisible for now. So there are a number of ways of creating the grid. Creating the column. The first way is the easiest, although it's not exactly the most recommended. I'm showing it to you because it really helps with practicing snapping and grouping and then selecting, whether you're selecting by component or individual object or complete group. So, just very, very quickly, you can create a polygon cube again. And this cube, I'm going to do the same thing that we did with the steps. I'll just go to Insert, click on the vertical axis here, hold down the C key, and middle mouse click to snap the pivot point to the bottom. And then I'll just snap. Then I'll hit the Insert key again, and in the Move tool, I'll use the X key to snap here, and this is going to allow me to select this in object mode, to hit the scale tool, and I'll scale this down, and maybe like that. So that's going to make the base of the column. All right, so I'm not really worried about aligning it with the steps layer. I'm going to scale it. And place it a little bit later, but in the same way that I did the steps, I'll just select this face down here and delete it because we're never going to see the bottom. Then I'll select this face and I'll extrude, and hit the scale part of the extrude it in, hit the G key and push it up. And so that's just kind of the two-step base of this grid. The next part of this is going to be to create the round piece of trim on here. So for that, I'm going to create a torus. So I'll just create a polygon torus, and that's a donut shape. And you can see that the torus has 20 sections going around. You can see that over here. We probably don't need 20 sections going around on this thing. We might be able to get away with half that amount. I think the minimum for any kind of a round surface would be 8. So going up to 20 would depend on what kind of detail you want in your column. For this particular one, I'm going to go pretty small. So I'm going to just go with maybe 12 divisions going around, and maybe 12 going up on the height. So this is a pretty simple torus. If I hit the 3 key, on this, you can see that it shows up pretty round without all that geometry. And since we're trying to keep this fairly simple, we might as well just keep it down to a small number. So we don't need the entire torus. So I'm going to select the faces at the bottom and delete them. All right, so now we just have a half a torus. And then we also don't need these inner faces here because a column is going to come right up from this edge. So we're not going to see anything on the inside, so we don't need that at all either. So I can select these by selecting one of these faces here and then shift selecting the one next to it and double clicking. And that's going to give me all of those faces going around, and I'll just delete them. I'll do that here again also. Select one face, shift select the one next to it and double click, and that deletes those. And then I'll do the same thing here. Shift select and delete those. So now I have that sort of quarter of a torus that's going to give me that nice piece of trim. So I'll select this and scale it. Oh, also, when I scale this, notice that the pivot point is already at the bottom. That's because by default, the pivot point is at the center. We deleted the bottom half. The pivot point stayed where it was. So I'm going to just go ahead and scale that down. And I'm going to move it, and I'll just move it above here, and then with the y-axis manipulator selected, I'm going to hold down the C key and snap it to the top edge of my cube, and then I'll just scale it down so that it looks kind of like the way that I want it. So that's the column base. So before I create the column, I just want to do a little bit of cleanup here. I've got the torus selected here, and notice that my translation is set to 0.101 and my scale is 0.085, and that's because I took the torus and I trimmed it and I scaled it, and Maya remembered all of those things. And so what I want to do is reset that so that all of these numbers here, the translation numbers are 0 and the scale numbers are 1. At the same time, Maya has kept track of all of the operations that I've done here, the delete components, and all that kind of stuff. So I want to get rid of that as well. So the way to do that is to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, and that gets rid of all the chain of little commands little operations that I've done on that torus. And then in order to reset these values, I want to go to Modify and then Freeze Transformations. So when I go to Freeze Transformations, that leaves this exactly the way that it was, but it resets all these numbers. So now this is a scale of 1, and it's in the 0 position based on where it was built. All right. So from here, I'm going to duplicate this. I hit Control D, and I'm going to just move it up here. And I just want you to notice, first of all, in the front view here, notice that the pivot point is right at the bottom of this, because that's where the pivot point was on the original. Let's scale this. Now, as I scale this, notice I can scale it so that it's completely flat, and then I can come out the other side so that my scale value becomes a negative value right here. So that's what I want to do. I want to take that scale value and actually make it -1. And that's going to give me, on the y-axis, and that's going to give me a mirror image of my old piece. And that's going to give me the capital there. So in order to create the column then, what I want to do is select both of these objects, make them one object. So by making them one object, I just go to Mesh, and then Combine, and that makes this one single mesh. It's not grouped, it's just what Maya considers that to be one mesh. From here then, I can select the inner edge of the top one by double clicking, and then I'm going to hold the Shift key and double click on the top edge of the bottom piece. I have both of those edges selected, they're highlighted in red, and I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, Edit Mesh, Bridge. In the options, for now, I'm going to set 0 divisions on that, which means that I'm going to get one straight lofted piece right there, and I'll click on Apply. By the way, the defaults settings give you 5 divisions. I'm going to set that down to 0, and that gives me this column. Now, because I've bridged in between, this is considered to be one object. Maya just keeps this as one object. All right. So I can set the height of this by selecting these vertices and just moving them up. So I can move them up, and you'll see that the bridge follows. Okay. And then for the top piece, I can take my bottom cube. I'm going to go ahead and delete the history from that. That's going to get rid of all of this stuff here. I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. That resets all of these back to 0 and 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and edit, duplicate. And so I could duplicate it and then just come over here and set the scale Y to 1. In this case, what I'm going to do is go to this option called Duplicate Special. And I'm going to just go ahead and reset those settings. And this block of 9 squares here allows me to plug in translation, rotation, and scale numbers, values for my duplicate. So I'm going to set the scale of the Y right here to -1 right off the bat. And then I just go ahead and click on Duplicate Special. And that gives me that inverse copy. Now, to place this properly, we need to reset the pivot point of this. All right, so I'm going to hit the Insert key, click on the yellow or the vertical Y-axis arrow, hold down the C key, and middle mouse click and drag on the bottom there. Then I'm going to hit the Insert key again, so I'm back in Move mode, and I'm going to come down here, hold the C key, and middle mouse click on the top of the column and drag, and that snaps that right there. So there's our column. It's made out of this base, and then this piece in the middle. So I've got 3 pieces to the column. Now, let's take a look at let's take a look at the hypergraph, which gives us a kind of a graphical representation of our scene. First of all, over here on the left, this cube that is grayed out, that's the steps. All right, so the grayed out just shows that that it's an invisible piece. We have the cube here, we have the torus, and we have the other torus, and then we have, so it looks like we have 3 toruses here, and then another cube. So why do we have 3 toruses? Well, that has to do with the construction history, because this final one, this one here, is our actual column. So let's rename this and call this column center. Okay. This torus, you see how when I select this torus, this whole column highlights in purple, and that just means that it's remembering that this column center was built out of these 2 toruses. So if I select this column center, you can see that my inputs are showing the construction history there. If I go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, you see those extra toruses go away. We don't need them anymore. That was just a historical reference as to how that column center was built. So now what I want to do is group these. So I can select these either in the interface here, and that's going to select all 3 of these nodes, or I can select all 3 of these nodes in the hypergraph, that selects them, or I can select them all in the outliner. It doesn't really matter. Oops. All right, and the next thing then is to group them. So I'm going to go to Edit, Group, and in the options here, I want to put the group pivot at the origin. So that's going to put this down at the base again. And notice what happens here. I have this hierarchical relationship where I have the group here as the parent, and then I have the bottom cube, the center, and the top cube as the children. All right, this is very important. So watch what happens here. If I select this whole thing in the interface, it selects the individual objects. If I try to rotate this, for example, it rotates each one of these based on its pivot point, which is incorrect. If I select the top of the hierarchy, The pivot point is located at the bottom, and it rotates this as a column. So I can construct all kinds of different things and group them, and as long as I pick the top of that group, it's going to treat it as a group. So here's the thing. If I select these in the interface, it selects the individual components, and what I need to do is use the up arrow key, and that will navigate up to the top of this group. I'm going to go ahead and name this, rename, entire column. All right, so that's the entire column. So you can pick this in various places. You can pick it in the interface and hit the up arrow key, or you can pick it in the Hypergraph window and make sure that you choose it that way, or you can pick it in the outliner and pick it that way. And this also is a good reason for wanting to name all of your objects. So this way you can find it pretty readily as the entire column. Now, when I want to, if I want to put this on my steps layer, I can select this again. I'm going to hit the up arrow key. I'm going to move it, and then I'm going to snap it using the X key and the middle mouse button. I'll snap it to the column there. I'll move it over, and so I think this column is a little bit chunky for the size of this base. So what I'm going to do is scale it. I'll scale it down like this. So I think that you know, it looks pretty good as far as the length and width of it, but it's also a little bit short. So I could scale it up on the y-axis, but if I do that, you can see everything scales, and I don't really want the base to scale, and I don't want that little torus piece to scale. I like the shape of these. I just want this thing to be taller. All right. So the way to do this would be to just move the vertices up. But the vertices, the individual components, don't respect the grouping that I've already done. So if I go to vertex and I select just those vertices, I can move those up, but it doesn't include this column. At the same time, if I select the column vertices, and move them, that doesn't include this this capital. So there's a couple ways I could do it. I could just move these. I could move these up. This is probably the easiest way to do it. I'll just move those up so that it's the height that I want. And then I can select this object here and then just re-snap it to the top. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So I'll just I'll select this. My pivot point is already where it belongs. I'll middle mouse click. I'm sorry, I'll hold the C key down and then middle mouse click on the top of the column and snap that down. So that gives me the column that I want. Now I can, I'm going to select this and hit the up arrow key and place it where it belongs, you know, where I kind of want it over here. And then I'm going to duplicate and move one copy of this. Again, I'm at the top of the hierarchy here. I've got the entire column here, and if I hit Control D, that duplicates it, and I'm going to move it just a little bit. Now, without touching anything else, I'm going to hold the Shift D, Shift and then D, and that duplicates with the prior transform. So I can continue to hit Shift D, Shift D, Shift D, all the way, and that's going to give me this whole colonnade. All right. Now I got pretty lucky there. I ended up pretty much, you know, where I really wanted to be in terms of where this whole colonnade is going to be. If I didn't get so lucky, and I want to center this, a couple things you want to remember. First of all, I built these steps on the center, so the center of the steps is at the center of the grid. So I know that all of my columns are evenly spaced, and if I center them all on the grid, then I know that they'll also be centered on the colonnade. I mean on the base. So I'm going to select all of the columns. Now I could select them all over here in the outliner, and that's going to give me all of the top nodes here. So let's just double check in the hypergraph, and you can see that I have the top nodes, and that's incredibly important. If I want to select them in the interface, I could do that as well. Just select all of these, but notice that by doing that, it selects the lower nodes. So I'd need to use the up arrow key. I just want to double check and make sure that I have all of the columns selected. I have 18 of them, and I'm going to group them. Now, the last time we used the grouping tool, we had the group pivot set to the origin, and that would take all these columns and put them in one group and set the pivot point at the 0, 0, 0. We don't want to do that. We want to have it find the center of this colonnade. So I'll group with the center, and now you can see I have group 1, and inside that group are all the columns. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this so that I know. Let's just double click here and call this colonnade. Okay, and the group pivot point is right in the middle of all that whole colonnade. So I'm going to just pull this down just to keep it off the grid for now. I'm also going to hit the 4 key so we can see a little bit better. We can see the grid. If I hold the Z key, if I hold the X key and then use the Z axis manipulator, I can snap that right to the grid there. So I know that this colonnade is exactly centered on the grid. I know that the steps are exactly centered on the grid, and so I know then therefore the entire colonnade is exactly centered on the steps. So I'm going to use this again. I'm going to hold down the X key and snap it along the X axis so that I can line it up with the from left to right. I'm at the top of this hierarchy here. I'm going to duplicate it, Control D, and this colonnade I'm going to move over here and use the X key, and I'm going to snap it exactly where it belongs over there. So now I have 2 colonnades on my Greek temple. Let's just turn off the wireframe on shaded. And so that's the way that you would do that. Everything is centered. It's all, perfect. So let me just show you a couple of things to watch out for. Let's just say that we want to, I want to group both of these colonnades. Well, I already have this one here, and that's called colonnade 1. I'm going to rename this and call this right colonnade. And then this one here I'm going to call left colonnade. Sorry. Okay, and then we already have this bottom part here. I'm going to call this temple steps. Okay, and I want to create one big group out of everything. So watch what happens here. If I'm going to just go into the hypergraph because it's a little easier to see. Let's just pull this down like this, and you can see that each one of these columns, this is what's really nice about this, is each one of these columns is a separate object in and of itself. All right, so if I wanted to make, say, a ruin, I could take a few of these, right, and delete them. All right, so now I'm making a ruined thing, but I've deleted an entire column. All right. If I wanted to say, tip them over, like that, I could tip over the entire column and so forth. What I would like to do is group the left and the right so that I have one group that represents all of the columns. Now I can pick these again in the interface. And you see that I get the lowest part of this. If I hit the up arrow, that's going to give me each column, and if I hit the up arrow again, that's going to give me each group. If I were to take these and not use the up arrow, and I group them instead, look what it does. It takes all those elements out of their original groups and groups them into one group that has, I can't pick anything below that. It just gives me all the little elements without a contiguous column. So I really don't want to do that. Let's just hit Control Z until they go back where they belong. All right, I want to hit the up arrow and the up arrow so that I have the two top nodes, and I'll group that, and this is going to give me the double colonnade. Okay, so the other thing that I can do in the hypergraph window is I can double click on that top node, and that will condense that whole hierarchy into one single node. If I double click on it again, it gives me the left colonnade and the right colonnade. If I want to alter one of the ones on the right colonnade, I just have to double click on that. That gives me each one of those columns. And then if I find the column that I want and double click on that, that's going to give me the components. So it automatically keeps it pretty neat for you. The next thing that I want to do is take these two nodes here, the temple steps and the double colonnade, and I'm going to group those. So this time I'll go to group, and this time I want the group pivot to be at the origin, and I'll group it, and I'm going to call this temple bottom. Okay. Now if I select the temple bottom, I can move it as one unit, and that's the whole point of grouping this together. The pivot point is at the center of the base, so I can go ahead and snap that right back to where it belongs.